right, welcome everyone. Just getting started here for our webinar. Let me share my screen. Great. Thank you all for joining. We're here for the retool webinar to talk about new internal builders and specifically how we can empower them without sacrificing some of the core tenets like security. Some administrative things before we get started. This is going to be a recorded webinar, so we'll be able to share out the link to the recording for anyone else on your team who might want to view it. And we are going to have some time for Q&A at the end. So if you have Q&A, feel free to add it to the chat, and we will address those after the presentation. But I really wanted to thank you all for coming. My name is David Swan, and I am one of our enterprise solutions engineers here at Retool, which basically means that I work with our customers and prospects to help understand where does Retool fit inside of their organization and how we can help solve problems. And that kind of leads into sort of the conversation because it's not, how we can help solve problems, but who is best poised to use Retool to help build those solutions out. So if I go in and check out our agenda today, first step is we're going to talk about sort of the state of software development. What are our current challenges? What is Retool's approach to AI-driven development and deployment? And that is really something I want to reference a lot is sort of, it's not just development, but it's also that deployment, that last mile problem. And we don't want to spend too much time in slides, so we are going to get into a demo where we're going to highlight a couple of things. First and foremost, the new development paradigms within Retool. How can we go from prompt to app? How can we edit with a prompt? How can we still edit with a cursor click, for lack of a better term? And then we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. I want to thank you all for joining, and without any further ado, jump into the content here. So what is like the whole premise for why you're here today? It's not just to apply security on top of software development, but it's addressing the new reality of software development. And it's that it has a lower barrier than ever before, meaning that new people can come in and build, meaning that we're quicker to get things sort of off the shelf. And that has been really enabled by some technology advancements, as well as frankly, some fits between how people approach the problems and sort of psychological components. And that technology side is where AI native tools have really come in to bridge that imagination and skill gap. When ChatGPT came out in 2022, the idea of having sort of the world exposed to any question was completely revolutionary. And now the advent of LLM assisted development has continued that sort of imagination of where I can take sort of any idea, not only ask a question, but I can take any idea and sort of build a solution. You describe it, AI builds it. That has dramatically changed who would we consider to be a natural builder of software solutions. And it's why we have seen this speed of prototyping be truly unmatched. But that prototype is what I want to reference a lot, because we sometimes see people are able to build really cool things, but not get it out of a local host application, or maybe not get it connected to a real resource. And this ad hoc automation is where a lot of companies try to address this. Try and build in either tooling or backlog triaging in order to address, sort of how can we take it from a local host application to something that is widely shareable with your entire organization on a real production grade solution. But that ad hoc automation sometimes has ad hoc challenges. And while it meets this like overarching need from a technology side, and it meets this sort of psychology need, right, where people want to be able to solve their own problems, right? And AI is doing that. It's giving them this ability to have self-sufficiency in their solutions. And that connection across the journey has been incredibly impactful, from going to this entire life cycle through this entire life cycle of development. And that kind of was the original promise, right? We were going to do POCs on top of AI, introduce it to organizations, and see it deployed. See all of these solutions out there in reality. And I don't know about anyone else on this call, but I talk to a lot of people and use AI every single day myself. Retool is AI first. We have this deployed across our organization in different capacities. But this curve is rarely the reality, right? And that's because we have this initial inspiration phase where we're going from a POC or some sort of initial pilot and introducing it, maybe in a department. But then when it comes out to sort of get that hockey stick level growth, that, you know, enterprise level adoption, that's where we're seeing all these challenges being met. These roadblocks being hit, where we're going in and struggling to actually deploy them out, scale these solutions out, and connect them to real resources. And that's where I don't think we have this natural curve. In reality, we kind of have an S curve. And most organizations are stuck at that plateau where AI is introduced, that POC maybe had some departmental adoption, but it's stagnated. And that's where we want to try and address the problem and bring a solution that gets that true prototype to production pipeline realized. And this is happening, this sort of plateau and people getting stuck in the mud here because of a couple of fundamental truths. While that bar to prototype has disappeared, the bar to ship hasn't moved. We still have a high bar of security, development standards, and testing even that are required to get things out the door. And when we look at studies, whether it be from McKinsey or from other internal evaluations or other studies, we're seeing sort of 1% of companies actually implement their AI solutions in production. And 95% of the pilots that don't make it anywhere, they stay stuck at that plateau. And it's not because these aren't amazing ideas and local host applications that have been built out, but it's because there's a backlog in order to meet the enterprise needs of development. And while AI-driven development has been dramatic, it does not mean the same thing as AI-driven deployment. And there are certain components that we need to make sure we include to get that out the door. And that's kind of this lurking cost of infinite development, because the more applications that we build, then we have this, UIX prototypes, and that's that initial promise, like I keep mentioning. But for each one of these prototypes, there's systems that need to be connected. There's authentication, like SSO. There's governance, whether it be from data or it be from actual functionality of the application. There's things like deployments. Where are we going to put the application, right? How are we going to build it into like a true, CI/CD process? Build out native testing or connect to your existing solutions. That work is still manual. And with all of these prototypes, it has exploded out. So much so that there's like maybe 2 organizations butting heads where everyone is now empowered to go build prototypes and explore the art of the possible. They have this new status as builders and they're truly empowered. But they get frustrated with that last mile problem. And whether that is a frustration because the AI solution isn't getting it across that last mile, or it's causing a sort of butting heads between the non-technical org and the technical org, it's resulting in frustration. It's resulting in a backlog that's growing and sometimes code that doesn't meet the standards of the organization. And where that backlog happens, as has been true for as long as software development has been around, shadow IT comes around, or people go around engineering, go around IT, maybe third-party solutions are bought, or maybe security steps are sort of skipped. And that expanding backlog has caused those impossible trade-offs, where people need to, in order to get their solution out quickly, maybe introduced new vulnerabilities or new weak points or failure methods. And there was a study that came out last week that said basically that 4x the velocity resulted in 10x the amount of vulnerabilities. Sort of that rush to production motion was causing problems. And we're seeing this across the entire SaaS space, right? There's been scenarios where databases have been dropped. There's been data breaches or just solutions that maybe are don't have the consistency and the reliability that we would expect. And that's where I think we have a ton of sort of ability to help balance the scales, to help connect the problem at hand to a situation where we can get the actual solutions into production. Because if you look at this as like a scales perspective, right? Like we have all of these applications. It could be forms, portals, CRUD apps, sort of all these different systems that integrate or are ideally going to integrate to your production systems. But in order to do that, those governance concerns need to be on the other side of the scale. And shadow IT is sort of pushing that imbalance, making it hard to ever truly make time and, again, forcing those trade-offs. And that's our goal here at Retool, is to bring in a solution that kind of balances those scales. Whereas if you're building out, whether, again, it be the forms, portals, different systems, we have a platform that applies these enterprise standards of security so that shadow IT or these impossible trade-offs, right, don't even have to be concerns. Whether you're building out 3 applications, 30 applications, 300 applications, we're applying this once, and we're applying these enterprise concerns or considerations for everyone across the org and every application across the org. And that's kind of the promise of Retool. We want to improve that development so we can get 10x the applications. We can introduce new builders, and we can still meet that promise of AI where we're giving sort of a newfound user base to create these solutions without having to sacrifice any of the security concerns. And to do that, I'm going to talk about sort of the Retool approach to development, which is 3 steps. And then I'm going to showcase it. So what are those 3 steps? Step 1, we have to build an application, right? This is 2026, so we want to build with a prompt, right? We want to be able to use natural language to trigger an LLM to go build an app, build a solution. Again, with security first, so being able to bring your own key. Organizations largely have sort of existing relationships and existing security agreements with the major LLM providers. When you don't train on your data, we don't ask you to sort of ignore those existing rules. Instead, bring your own key to be able to do it securely and within inside of your existing solutions. Eventually, how do we build in Retool? Again, natural language to prompt, being able to drag and drop in that same IDE, mixed modal development, and then be able to write code. Still be able to write SQL, write Python, write JavaScript, use existing languages that people already know and support, and being able to edit and inspect where that is AI-driven and AI-generated. Once the application is built, there's fundamental things that need to happen to make it production grade. Step 1, it needs to be governed. That governance steps in with connecting to real data. So having an LLM use an existing resource connection so that it's connecting to Salesforce, Snowflake, whatever your API of choice may be, to actually get real data in there. But do that in a way that security is going to approve it, because it's using already existing resource connections, and it's leveraging things like role-based access control and your SSO. And then deployed in your flavor of choice, whether that be in your cloud, like your AWS account, or that being sort of a Retool SaaS environment. We've got a built application that's connected to real data, ready to be deployed. But to make sure it's reliable and tested is that last mile, right? Where it needs to be fully integrated into your SDLC. And this can be connected to your existing solutions, right? Whether you're connecting to an existing testing platform like Playwright or Cypress, or you're using source control, using monitoring inside of retool or porting out that observability statistics out to like Datadog or Splunk. And then lastly, no matter how an application is built, there are times it needs to be debugged. And having a clean interface to debug surface things like what is our linting issues, like actually have a console to go through the interactivity of the application is that last mile that keeps the applications reliable and usable. Because the moment a app fails is where we lose the trust. And that is something that is a huge limiter when it comes to getting AI generated apps into production. Is when it hits that first stumbling block. So we can build in a secure manner that's governed and ready to be launched. We can help address that. And that's kind of the retool approach. Being able to connect to your production systems and get that value of having that mixed modal development, but launched in this world that is approved to get the actual applications in front of the real users. Now, I've walked through from a slide perspective, sort of why this is a problem, sort of what is our approach to help get the applications out there in production. But I think it all comes down to reality. So I'll walk through a quick demo of how we can support those sort of natural language style development modes and then deploy it within best practices. I jump in here. First thing I want to showcase is the retool that we already know and love. But you'll notice that we have, what are we building today? Whether you want to launch a new application just from the homepage or go and create a new app, there is the ability to quickly go in and make sure that we have sort of this connection between all of our different tools. And I am just going to connect here to my new app. And this is where we are in live. So I'm going to go to my solution. We're going to work backwards, where I can quickly go and see that I have an application here, and I want to showcase how I built it, right? From being able to see all of the different support tickets, right? Like the idea of, having anyone be able to build the right solution is being able to support their personal workflows. So if I was on the support team and I wanted to be able to triage all of my different support tickets, be able to go in and say, what's the priority? This one is high. I want to update that. I want to change my assignee and reassign this to a team member because I'm going on vacation, right? And be able to update these steps or even export it and send it off to a downstream system. And have this connecting not only just linear, but also our employees registry to pull in those different assignees and again, export to external action. But how do we get here? If I edit my application, we're going to see the same existing development modalities of retool with one new addition, assist, where I could go in and I could, like I mentioned, still drag and drop to expand, or I could prompt that. And that's exactly how I built this application. Is I went in and I was able to start purely from a prompt. We scroll back to the top, we'll see our blank canvas was right here, where I was able to walk through, create that application. And because this is a real system that I'm connected to an actual linear resource, it's going to do a full human in the loop development cycle where I can walk through, build out a plan that's going to support those users, and then walk through each step of that plan. And I can integrate it throughout the process, like tell it to use best practices, integrate with more steps, and actually have it build out my application, connecting to real resources, writing real GraphQL in this experience, or real SQL, real JavaScript, making real API calls. So much so that we get to an end state of a working application. I'm going to refresh my page here and show again that same experience where I was able to walk through and not only get our application built out with full export functionality and seeing our assignees, but integrate a second database, connecting to RetoolDB to pull in the employees, calling not only the resources, but the components to target my native prompt development style. Now, what I've shown are is a pre-built application, but I can go in and I can continue to build this out. Something, whether it's simple as or complex as adding in a database, or more simple like changing the styling, like using modern design best practices and drawing inspiration from high design fidelity apps. Make this app feel more modern with a dark theme. And just like I used natural language to build the application, I can use natural language to edit the application. And in this scenario, it's going to do stylistic edits, right? I come from a data background and sort of like building out those solutions, but I don't have those natural design systems natively built out. And so I want to integrate those into the development process, using those modern aesthetics, drawing inspiration from other brands, applying themes and incorporate the out-of-the-box retail components to make this happen too. But the quick prototyping and iteration that I'm seeing has been incredibly valuable. And it's going to go in and add these steps. But if I ever wanted to change something, like remove that target icon, I can quickly go in. And I'm going to then not only be able to see these steps, but I can also govern. And I'm going to let this run in the background while we talk about those security steps. Because while we're talking a lot about these resources, and this scenario being linear and retool DB, there's so many different resources we can connect to. And out of the box with retool, this is what provides that first layer of security. Being able to go in and have an administrator or anyone with the right role-based access control define what resources we want to connect to, set the configuration so that each end user can connect to BigQuery, can go and connect to your GraphQL endpoint or whatever source it may be, whether that be dragging and dropping or using natural language like I showcased with linear. And these can be, again, connected to your real resources, but then there's also the need to be able to govern and sort of secure this application, for lack of a better term. And one step of that is source control, right? Most organizations have connections to things like GitHub or Bitbucket to do that. And that's what we're able to do here with Retool as well. And as it continues to build this out and continues to work through the editing motion, we're going to publish the application and actually connect it directly to my GitHub instance and show a real pull request and show how if we were to go in to your development environment, we're going to see applications that are protected, that need to be able to actually create branches so that they follow that proper SDLC best practices. Especially in the era of sort of more application development and more users being onboarded, we want to make sure that that is done in a way that supports new users, new growth, and keeps the security top of mind. And jump back over where we should have our stylistic changes all done. Again, got that beautiful application, and I could publish it out. You can see my rounded edges, my dark theming, still with the ability to go do all of that functionality. I'm going to publish it to my publish folder. And we're going to go in and we are going to quickly then showcase how if I go back to home, our applications, our ticket prioritization tool can be connected directly to our source control instance. So again, we walk through and where we have these branches jumping across from, again, protecting the application. And whenever a change needs to be made, quickly building a branch, walking through that merge process, creating a PR and using your existing SDLC, your existing SSO, and your existing security best practices. And that's where Retool takes the sort of application best practices out of purely a sort of prototyping world and takes those final steps from launching to securing and monitoring these solutions. Now, we've walked through a lot here in 30 minutes or less, as promised, but one thing I do want to highlight is it's not just sort of how we build the applications, but it's how we support and launch them indefinitely. And that was the sort of theme of a recent study that we did, where sort of this build versus buy shift, where interviewing, almost 1,000 different customers and pulling in sort of different data to understand where organizations making the decision to buy off the shelf solutions and build customly. And when they make those decisions, what are the concerns top of mind? And from this research, we're seeing a lot of sort of top of mind considerations to get those build solutions out the doors, that last mile, like I've mentioned, from the launching to securing to integrating with your SDLC. Really appreciate everyone's time. And with that, I wanted to open up for some Q&A. Please feel free to put your Q&A in the chat and we'll go through them one at a time. Great. So it looks like the first question here is let me read them through as they're coming in. So there was one question about, will we be able to add images to show the designs? We want to drive the inspiration, right? We are actually working on that this year, being able to pull in whether it be like a Figma design or a PDF or an image file, being able to use that as sort of inspiration and as the original prompt is something that's actively on the roadmap and on track to come later this year. And then that also is going to connect to the edit mode of these development, whether that is like, how does that interact with AI to ensure performance, right? There's a question about how do we make sure there aren't delays across interactions. And the AI system running in the background is running in the development, right? So you noticed as I was going through that process, when I asked it to redo the design styling, right? It took some time to work through those steps, to inspect every single component, to go and do research from the internet, to find brand inspiration, to make it modern, dark themed. That's when the LLM is taking action. And that's where maybe you could see some, lag, for lack of a better term. But outside of sort of the active assist working, there shouldn't be the LLM causing those latency issues. And so if you're seeing that, we'd love to learn more. Please reach out to your account team or the community forum. We can drill in a little bit deeper. There was a question about UX and design. And that is really exciting too, because one of the things that Retool has always been known for is how can we use your existing libraries and sort of your existing best practices. And so if I jump back into our demo here and we go back into our ticket prioritization tool and edit it, you'll notice on the left here, we have preloaded JS and preloaded CSS. As we change the building modalities to be more LLM native, we're not changing the core competencies of Retool and sort of what separates the platform from building out prototypes to production. Still the ability to upload, whether it be preloaded JS or your custom libraries at the application level, JavaScript, or at the workflow level, Python. Token interaction, because Retool is bring your own key, we do sort of integrate with your LLM. So you should see token, implications of that, but it would, sort of be integrated to your existing LLM of choice. If you're using retools provided LLMs, that is a conversation we'd love to understand, sort of like, and make sure that we have the right account plan and agreement. We have different branches develop different features at the same time. Yes, different users can go in and create branched applications, right? And that we see all the time with sort of collaborative style building. So there is a demo that I'm working on with one of my peers, right? And so if I pull it up right here, we're going to see, healthcare example where I can build a really beautiful UI that's highly interactive, but we have it connected to source control. So if I were to go in and create a new branch, my peers can also create branches at the same time and then go through the same exact PR process, commit and merge that. And as long as it doesn't cause any conflicts with the main or with any other development, right, that we're seeing across my peers that I'm co-working this with, we can have those branches interacting, being built at the same time, keeping that sort of best practices, but being able to move fast and collaborate. You guys are adding a bunch of great questions here. We really appreciate it. Sorry, I was going through these one at a time. So yes, different branches. We can have people break those out to create different features at the same time. And as we just read through these next ones here. Ah, this is a great question. So this one is, how does Retool AI Assist have context to help you perform and select and write queries to external data sources like Postgres that we host in Azure? How does it understand the database structure? That is the beauty of using a pre-connected resource, is that just like when you are currently building in Retool, right? So if I were to currently go into this application that I was building, I were to go to create a new resource, right? Go to my employees query. I see I have the schema, not just for the employees table, but for all the tables that I have inside of Retool database. As I connect to linear, right? Again, I can see the schema, I can explore what's inside of here, and I can see the output for when that query is ran. That same level of exposure can be accessed from. So Sys is able to go and basically understand the schema of the pre-connected resource to understand how to write this query. That is that same level of exposure that I'm seeing as an end user is essentially what we're exposing out to the LLM to be able to build out the query. It's not the data, right? We're not just like you are with Retool, right? We're not hosting or storing, caching your data, but we're using an LLM to write and kick off a query. And that's where, again, that whole idea of like, how do you get an application into production? Well, we do it by having connected resources that adhere to your security policies and meet your existing standards. So just for those who've joined late, we're walking through the Q&A. Just walked through a really great question on how does Assist understand your database to be able to write the right query with inside the right structure, right? Like when I said connect to linear, how did it write GraphQL versus making an API call? Because linear in my system is a pre-configured GraphQL endpoint. All right, next question. How does one secure against AI learning and capturing sensitive data? Result align with internal AI policies? Great question. There's two ways we approach this. One, bring your own key. Using LLMs that already have rules about training and understanding, and the one that is supported and defined as your internal agreements, that is a way that a lot of companies use Retool AI to already meet the security rules. And then secondly, we are using an LLM to write and to build out applications, not necessarily to analyze the data itself, right? So there is a A different level of data that we need to be able to create than would be to sort of create that end analysis. And those are our different functions that we can leverage inside of Retool and really choose what we expose and what we share with the LLM. Just working through these questions and appreciate all of the great feedback. How does someone secure against AI learning, capturing sensitive data? So we just covered that one with bring your own key is the first way to approach that. And then as we go through, what is the easiest and quickest way to build your own CRM project management tool? So step one is to understand sort of what you would want that CRM project management tool, like being able to concretely describe it in 2 or 3 sentences as a prompt. That's step one. If you want to start with, sort of demo data, we can do that. And then in step two, connect it to your resources. But once you have your prompt, and once you have maybe the UI built out with Assist, you can then connect it to your resources, define those in Retool, like I showed in that create new resource screen, and then tell the LLM to replace any demo data or any pre-provided examples with the actual production data. So kind of building it out iteratively in a couple of different steps is a way that I really like to approach those problems. There was a question on MCP servers. So we're spending a lot of time on Retool Assist because that is the way that we can support sort of the natural language, sort of prompt to app gen level capability. MCP servers are already supported in the agents part of the platform, which allows for automated backend actions. And we can call external MCP servers to be able to go do those actions and leverage them as tools. And I know that we'll have future webinars and other conversations that drill deeply into agents. And if there's any questions, please reach out. We'd love to walk through that product with you. And then language settings besides English available. So retools can be fully internationalized. We have customers all around the world. We support different languages today. And because we're leveraging LLMs, which also are multilingual, those prompts today largely do support, if you wanted to write it in Spanish or Italian or other languages. And then the front end application that it builds out, as long as you have internationalization set up, we should be able to support you. And then the last question I have here is one of my favorites because it leverages workflows, which is probably my favorite part of the platform. For those who are not familiar, workflows are our backend automation. So it's that if this, then that style logic. I want one block to happen, which executes another block and another block. These are created with today manually, but we are incorporating into our roadmap being able to build these out with Assist. And there is maybe a beta version is the best way to put that out today, where you can sort of at a high level create workflows from a prompt and actually drill into that. And that is actively part of our roadmap to improve that further. Give a minute or here two for any other questions. I've really appreciated your active participation, everyone, and sort of walking through this, especially while we had technical difficulty there. But I wanted to again highlight we have this build versus buy report. QR code, you can find it here, as well as we will share out the link.